Former Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore is suing to stop Alabama from certifying that he lost this month's race. The suit claims that there were irregularities with the vote and there should be a fraud investigation and eventually a new election. Moore lost to Democrat Doug Jones by about 22,000 votes.
In a statement, Moore says, quote, "This is not a Republican or Democrat issue, as election integrity should matter to everyone." Now, despite the lawsuit, the state canvassing board is expected to meet later today to declare Jones the winner. Gabe Debenedetti is a national political reporter at Politico. Say it 3 times fast. And now explain to me how, weeks after this election, which everyone, including the president, agreed Doug Jones won, this guy, Roy Moore, still thinks he has a chance to win this, does he?
Short answer is no.
We have time for a longer one.
That's okay. That sounds good to me. So essentially, Moore is saying that there were illegal votes here, that there were irregularities, but the citations in this long lawsuit don't really tend to make a ton of sense, at least according to people down in Alabama. What is likely going to happen is that the state will finally say, okay, it's official, Doug Jones is the winner at some point in the next few days, and then Doug Jones will pop up early next month in January as the new Democratic senator from Alabama.
And what does that mean for the Senate?
That's a great question. It makes everything a lot harder for Republicans in the majority to get things done because for the first time in 25 years, there is a Democrat from Alabama. Their margin is now just 1, so it's a lot narrower path if they're going to try and pass any major legislation over the next year or so.
Now, meanwhile, President Trump made his first appearance since going down to Florida for the holidays. Here's what he had to say at a local firehouse.
We have signed more legislation than anybody. We broke the record of Harry Truman. We have the all-time record for stopping ridiculous regulations, and we're very proud of that record. That's one of the reasons the stock market is up.
Gabe, how valid is the president's assertion that he set a new legislative record?
Not very. In the first 100 days, it is true that he signed more pieces of individual legislation than any president in many decades. But one, that's not a very good gauge of what that's actually doing. But two, the first 100 days have been over for about 250 days. So over the course of the first year of this presidency, the President Trump actually lags far behind a lot of his predecessors in terms of legislation passed. But what a lot of his supporters would say is it's not actually a question of what legislation he's signed that is an indicator of what he's done. There are also all sorts of regulations that he's passed and rolled back, all sorts of things that have happened through the agencies. But in terms of talking about sheer number of legislative pieces signed, it's a sort of bizarre thing for him to be talking about because it's simply not true.
Do you think he might be including those other regulations that don't technically count as legislation?
Absolutely. He's certainly signed a lot of executive orders, simply issued a lot of statements that sound like new policies, and of course signed some pieces of legislation, including this tax reform bill just last week. So he has been doing a lot, but again, he's not signing individual bills here.
Certainly quality over quantity when it comes to legislating. The tax bill, a big quality, big piece of important legislation. As we look ahead to 2018, what does the president and the Republican-controlled Congress hope to get done?
Well, they're not really sure right now. Everyone seems to have different ideas. The president says he wants to talk about health care, wants to talk about infrastructure. Mitch McConnell, who runs the Republican conference in the Senate, says something sort of similar, wants to talk about big health care issues, things like that. But then you look at Paul Ryan, who's running the House, and he wants to talk about entitlement reform, Medicaid and Medicare. Now, the president doesn't necessarily agree. Mitch McConnell doesn't necessarily agree. So they're all going to have to sit down in the next few weeks and figure out what's actually going to happen here.
Well, and let me stop you there because you said the I word, infrastructure. And if there's any piece of overlap between the president's agenda and Democrats' agenda, I would think it's infrastructure. So is that possible?
It's certainly possible in some world. What we don't know is
some world.
What we don't yet know.
Not very encouraging, Gabe.
I'm just trying to be a realist about this one. We don't yet know what infrastructure actually means. A lot of Democrats suspect that when the president talks about infrastructure, he's talking about that border wall of his. So while Democrats are all into the idea of investing in highways, investing in jobs programs all over the country, they're not about to start spending money on something that could end up as a border wall.
All right, Gabe Debenedetti, thank you so much.
Thank you.